in the employer sector. And I think it will be quite different. So our next speaker, who is an expert in measuring employer health care benefits and the employer sector, and has been doing this for as far as I can remember. And when he was a little boy, John Gabel is the senior fellow with the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago in Washington, and he specializes in research on the private health insurance market and in the U.S. He's been doing this for many, many years. He's the author of more than 135 published articles in scholarly journals and books, including 57 in the influential journal Health Affairs, the policy journal in the healthcare field, and he's considered by everyone to be an expert in the employer healthcare sector. So please welcome John Gabel.
Thank you, Paul, and Jim, you're a tough act to follow. Well, I want to first of all begin by thanking Paul and Margaret for organizing this unique conference, which is always the best conference that I attend all year. Now, the reason why it is unique is, first of all, it brings together practitioners, employers, insurers, members of the provider community. That is different. Secondly, it is unique because each year we have the same speakers, virtually the same speakers, virtually the same audience, sitting in virtually the same seats. Okay, now I am a compulsive public opinion pollster, so let me poll you. Last year I asked you, would the ACA rollout be smooth or rough? And before I could say rough, you began laughing. And you were right. So this year I ask you, the future of the Affordable Care Act. And I'm only going to give you two choices. Number one, it will be repealed, and that can be repealed and replaced, or will it be modified in the future? So for how many people think it will be repealed or repealed and replaced? Okay, very interesting. So that again means hopefully in the future we're going to modify it and improve it. Now I have to say, let me go to my second question. How many people think since 2010 healthcare costs, you get two choices, have accelerated or they have deaccelerated? So how many, and accelerated, of course, deaccelerated means premiums continue to increase but at a slower rate. So how many people believe that since 2010 premiums have accelerated? Show of hands. Okay, and how many believe it's deaccelerated? Larger. Okay, the second group, you're right. Okay, now, and what that tells me is for the second group, you do not get your news from cable news. You read something else. Now if I can figure, okay, here we go. This sort of, and along these lines, as I read the newspapers, as I listen to cable news, I am struck when I listen to the commentary of political partisans and partisan pundits. I am struck how they can find a dark cloud on a bright sunny day. And I was thinking, what would happen if historically these cynics were writing the headlines of newspapers? Going back, what if they were writing the headlines during VJ Day? What would the newspaper have looked like? Okay, so today, this is what I will, my objectives are to document the state of employer-based health insurance, to observe changes over 10 years, and to review changes in the structure and products in the small group and individual market in the first year of the ACA. So just a quick review of the KFF survey. Last year, it surveyed 2,067 randomly selected public and private employers. The interviews are with the employee benefit managers, began in January, ended in May. The response rate was 49%. This is a continuation of the earlier Health Insurance Association and KPMG surveys. The common element of all these is I was employed by these organizations. We used statistical weights. Most of them will be on how a typical employee is affected. Some will be employer weighted. And then I also show the results of the California HealthCare Foundation. I thank the foundation for their support. We've been doing this survey, first of all, since 1999 with Kaiser and later with the California HealthCare Foundation. We survey private employers with 3 or more workers. The employers are randomly chosen, and our sample size was 651 employers in 2014. Now, I want to say this about surveying in California. Our survey firm tells us that it is one of the most difficult places in the country to complete an interview, along with the east of New York, Massachusetts, easiest place in the country, the Great Plains states. So here is a history of health insurance, employer-based health insurance beginning in 1988. Okay, so I'm going to just label the different periods. Here is the beginning of managed care. This is when we moved to restrictive managed care, and we'll talk more about it later. But it meant narrow networks, HMOs. Then we have the retreat from managed care, the backlash from managed care, and premiums increases. And now we move to an era of high deductible plans here. Please ignore this observation. We think that the 2011 survey, or 10, I can't remember which year it was I think it's 2011, was a statistical outlier. We do not believe this. We also showed in the midst of the recession an increase in the number of employers offering coverage, so we ignore this. And so we have it at 4%. This coming year, that is for family coverage. The increase was 4%. The overall rate of workers' earnings up 2%, CPI 1%. So it is we are now, if we ignore this one, we've had historically lower increases in premiums now for a number of years. It's still well above inflation, but it's certainly a lot better than other times in our history. And now California. Now I'm measuring inflation differently in California, and the simple reason is Kaiser changed their way. In California, NORC and the foundation wanted to continue the historical pattern. What this would suggest, though, is, first of all, the rates of increase in premiums are substantially greater than they are than is overall inflation. And secondly, the rate of inflation appears to be higher in California than in the rest of the country. And I will, in a subsequent graphic, give one interpretation why. Okay, here is the average cost of health insurance in the country today. And we can see that for all plans, it's now $16,351, well above the minimum wage. We can see that the most expensive plans are PPO plans. The high deductible plans are the lowest cost, but these figures do not include the employer contribution for the savings option. But many times, there is no contribution for the savings account. And the HMOs are a little less than the PPOs. And of course, these are all unadjusted figures, unadjusted for geographic location or the financial protection offered by the plan. Now, how does California compare to the US? When I was giving this talk 12 years ago, I would talk about the California miracle, how you have a state with such high real estate values and your premiums are below the national average. This is no longer true. In fact, it is now roughly a 20% difference between California and the nation. The difference is particularly true for PPO plans. And you can see in California, this is the monthly premium. The average for a family is $1,363, and I think that puts it over $17,000 a year, going on $18,000 a year. And again, the PPO plans are most expensive. Now, here's one reason why I believe California premiums are increasing more rapidly than the rest of the country. In California, you are remaining with the HMO plans. And you are not buying the high deductible plans with savings options. It is only 6% of enrollment, and you've showed almost no increase over the last 3 or 4 years. Whereas nationwide now, the high deductible plans are now 20% of the market. I'm sorry. Yes, it is labeled upside. My apologies. My apologies. So this is nationwide, and this is California. So it's 20% of the market now. Nationwide is the high deductible plans, and it's greater than the HMO market share, 14%. Whereas in California, the HMOs are 53%. So I think what has occurred is you have not had the drop in actuarial value, in financial protection. In California, that has occurred in the rest of the nation. And how about what are workers paying out of pocket for premiums? Well, in absolute dollars, you can see this dramatic growth from $52.88 to $388 for family coverage, and in single coverage from $8 to $83. And you can see in the last year, we just grew from $360 to $380 with regard to family coverage. But if we look at the percentage paid, it's been relatively constant since around 2004 or so. And with regard to family coverage, it really has been relatively constant also. So the pie is getting bigger, and so as an employee, you see yourself paying more and more. But the share has been relatively constant. Now, this shows the increase in deductibles, and this goes back to why California premium increases may have gone up more than the rest of the country. This includes both plans that offer health insurance, that have deductibles and don't have deductibles. And what we find, so there's two ways that the average deductible can go up. Number one, more plans have deductibles. Number two, the deductibles are larger. In fact, both of these forces have taken place since 2005. And we can see that the average deductible since 2005 has more than tripled. And what does this mean, of course? It means that fewer people the use of healthcare services will be less. And that can put downward pressure on premiums. On the other hand, from what we know in research, it does not mean consumers become better shoppers, because I think the body of evidence would suggest that cost sharing in the form of higher deductibles is a blunt instrument. It tends to reduce the use of both effective and ineffective services. Okay, this shows based on filings with the insurance companies, what has been the premium increases starting with 2008. In 2010, when the ACA began, loss ratio review went into effect, and that results in if the loss ratio, which is the ratio of benefits and quality improvements to premiums, if it is too low, there are refunds. And we can see in the individual market, we have had a substantial decrease in premium increases. And in the small group market, we also see the same phenomena. So, Jim, that's something for you to talk about with your colleagues, okay? Who said that the ACA has had no effect. And now, this information, I'll try to go through real quickly because my time is short. But here, this is based on McKinsey's analysis of the exchanges. I think we are seeing, bottom line, we are seeing changes in the small employer and individual insurance market on the exchanges. This is the exchanges, not everything. Maybe it's a spillover. The first thing is we're seeing new entrants. And in fact, about 28% of the carriers on the market are now new entrants, and they're largely co-ops and Medicaid plans. But when it comes to the number of plans offered, it is less, and you can see what a strong role the Blues plan have. 48%. This is for the individual insurance market, and then another phenomena we're seeing is, in order to try to keep premiums low, we're seeing the return to managed care plans. I would almost say it's 1994 all over again. So we have 35% of the incumbents are offering HMOs, 47% of the new entries, and EPOs are a 22% and 20%. So you're seeing much more restrictive, tightly forms of managed care. And then lastly, we're seeing narrow network plans. So you don't try to sign up every hospital in the area, you try to sign up a selective number. And I think that the good news here is this brings about provider competition. The bad news would be you can't go to the doctor or hospital that you may want to. And here we see only broad or only 30%. So I'm going to skip this, and let me just go to the conclusions, the summary. Premiums up 4% nationally, 5.7%. In California, deductibles continue to rise. The ACA has altered the individual market, and it looks like 1994 again. By that, I mean we're returning to HMOs and EPO. We're seeing substantial entry. We are seeing narrow hospital networks. And I think that there's some evidence that loss ratio and rate review have lowered the rate of increases in the individual and small employer market. Now, how about the future? I can line up, I don't have time, but if you ask me about it, I'd be glad to in the question and answers. There's many forces on each side that could predict an uptick in premium increases or going down. I think I would go with, in the next year or so, I think we will see a continuation of the current trend, so we'll be around 4 or 5%, I believe. Thank you.